All right, guys. So I'm gonna explain the biggest advantages. At least the biggest advantage for learning Japanese, right? So it's actually content in the language, right? I don't think there is another language. Quote me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's another language that comes close to the amount of content there is in Japanese, other than English. Of course, English is gonna be, of course, like where all the content will be at. But I think in terms of second to that would be Japanese, right? I think a lot of people that learn English, they learn English through YouTube videos, right? They learn English through watching TV and Netflix So like if you see a lot of people that try to learn English as a second language, they learn them mainly through content, and that's the reason why they're fluent, not because of school, right? And that's the same with me, Japanese. Like with me, I consumed a ton of anime, a ton of manga, and I got like super fluent, right? Just by not even like I didn't even have to go to like YouTube videos in Japanese. Like I didn't even have to go to like dramas. Like I with just otaku stuff alone, with just weeb crap, with just anime and manga, I reached like a very high level of fluency in Japanese, right? And I guarantee you, bro, I would not have reached this level if it wasn't for anime, if it wasn't for all the content there was in Japanese, right? So the biggest advantage for Japanese is just the fact that the content is just like huge, because the reality is like if you want to learn a language, you have to spend an enormous amount of time in the language. All right. Now the amount of time you need to spend with the language differs depending on the language. So for me with French, I would say it takes you like 1,000 to 2,000 hours of reaching a fluent level of French. Like that's the amount of time you need to spend immersing yourself in the language, watching content in the language. With Japanese, it takes four times that amount. It takes like 8,000 hours. So roughly at 6,000, 8,000 hours, like that's when you would expect yourself to reach like fluency in Japanese by immersing in the content. So it takes four times the amount in Japanese versus like, French is like super easy, right? But guys, even with French, you would think that French has like a lot of content, right? When I was learning French in, 2019, 2020, which is basically like, 2020, 2023. No, not 2023. 2020 and around like 2019, right? Which is like, I think like 5 years ago, 4 years ago. Um, French YouTube was still developing. So there was not as much content back then with French YouTube. And even just content in general. There weren't a lot of TV shows, like French TV shows out there. There wasn't a lot of like, you know, YouTube videos like back then, right? Which is why I struggled with French because like with French, like I was struggling to find content to watch, right? That was the main problem with French is I just didn't have enough content to watch. Whereas with Japanese, like I had unlimited amounts of anime I could watch, unlimited amounts of manga and books and light novels that I could consume. Like there's unlimited amounts, right? Now French YouTube today has become very like big, right? Like it's actually become very good. Like French YouTube right now is like, it's like a good time to learn French because French YouTube has developed a lot. There's a ton of content. There's a lot more YouTube creators in the French community, right? So French YouTube just has gone way better since compared to when I tried to learn it, right? Because when I was learning it in 2019, like I was struggling, bro. I was only watching like Squeezie, Locklear, and Inoxtag, and I was like watching the lives. Like I was watching Domingo's lives, and Locklear and Squeezie. Like those are the only guys I was watching because everything else just didn't interest me, right? So even for me with French, like even for like a language like French, like you expect like you would have a lot of content in the language, but even for a language like French, like I was struggling to find content. But with Japanese, like this never happens, you know. Like even if you like in 20 like even in 2008, right? Like even if you tried to learn Japanese in 2008, like you'd still have a ton of anime and a ton of manga that that you wouldn't even have time to like watch all of it or like consume, right? So that's the thing with Japanese is, with Japanese it's a lot of content that you can consume and you can use this to your advantage to learn Japanese, like I did, right? Like if you're gonna watch a lot of anime, like anyway, and you expect yourself to like continue to watch anime and stuff, then like why don't you just like watch all those animes that you watch and like just learn the language through the process? You know? I mean, you're already spending like 8 hours a day learning, like watching anime. Like, why don't you just spend 8 hours a day watching anime without subtitles, so that you can actually get fluent in Japanese? You know what I mean? Like, if you're gonna watch 8 hours of One Piece a day, like people complain, oh my god, One Piece is so long. One Piece is like, oh, it takes forever to watch. Like, dude, rewatch One Piece like 2 times in Japanese without any English subtitles. I mean, I didn't do that, but I did watch like One Piece anime from like the beginning all the way up to like Enies Lobby, which is like 400 episodes. Like, so, like, there's no excuse, guys. Like, actually, One Piece is really good, guys. Because like the thing with One Piece is that for some reason, it's easy to understand. Like when I was watching, like One Piece was one of the very first animes that I immersed myself in, right? When I was getting into learning Japanese, like that's one of the first animes that I, immersed myself in. And, despite me not understanding the language a lot, I was able to understand a lot of what was happening. And partially because I already watched the anime before, so like I already had knowledge of like the story. But even when I was rewatching it, even though I didn't understand like every single word or phrase they were saying, like I was understanding the plot and I was understanding what was going on, right? And I learned a ton of words watching One Piece. Like I learned the word for Sora, which means sky. I learned the word for Fune. I learned the word for Mugiwara. Like I mean, dude, Mugiwara is like he would just like scream that like Straw Hat like all the time, right? Like you learn, in Kaizoku, like I mean, the Kaizoku is a very specific word, but you can even learn like the very like common words in Japanese. Because remember, like the most frequent words in Japanese are used in any domain of Japanese, not just anime. Like, you know what I mean? So you can learn the very common words and grammar patterns, whether you're watching like news, watching drama, or watching anime. It doesn't matter, right? Now, of course, there's going to be very anime specific vocabulary that you learn, right? If you use anime as content, but that's fine because you're still learning 90% of the language, right? Remember, 90% of Japanese is all the same within any genre, whether you're reading a book, whether you're reading sci-fi, fantasy, normal high school drama. It does not matter what content you're consuming. 90% of the language is the same. There's just an extra 10% of the language that has its own spice and flair, right? So when you watch anime Japanese, like there's that extra 10% of anime Japanese that has its own flair to it, which is different than like normal Japanese. But it's still 90% the same. 90% of the core language is still the same. There's just that extra 10% that you have to learn. So like when I was training, and this happens even within like the like anime domain. So like for example, the difference in vocabulary between a fantasy anime and a slice of life high school drama romance anime would be huge, right? Even though 90% of the language is the same, there's still that extra 10% of specialized vocabulary that you had to know. Like there would be like 10% of like fantasy One Piece vocabulary that you would have to know to understand, what they were saying. And then if you were watching like a romance high school drama show, then there would be the extra 10% of like high school words of like, or like, school words. Like there would be like a bunch of school words that you would have to learn in Japanese that wouldn't be used in One Piece, for example, right? But you can still learn 90% of the language by just watching One Piece, So guys, like people make it, so that's the thing, guys. One of the biggest advantages with Japanese is the content, and I recommend you guys abuse it. All right. Big and with French right now, it's the YouTube scene is getting really good in France. So yeah, guys, I recommend using that to learn French. But with Japanese, bro, like you have endless amounts, right? Even though Japanese is the hardest language ever, I do agree that Japanese is probably the hardest language you ever learn. Hardest language by down. I mean, I'm gonna learn Arabic, like because I'm a Muslim, so I'm gonna have to see how that goes. But so far, right now, like even Chinese, like I look at Chinese and I'm like, bro, like it's not even close because at least with the Chinese readings with the Hanzi, right? At least like the readings are congruent with like like all the words. In Japanese, it's not like that. Like it changes. Like you have like 4 different ways of reading this one kanji depending on the context of the word. It's like way too. It's like a colossal mess. Like the Japanese language is like a colossal mess that tried to be Chinese, right? So imagine like you have a Japanese language and it tried to be Chinese and now it's like a colossal mess. So good luck, right? So like when you try to learn Japanese, you're gonna be like, why is this kanji read with this reading and differently in this word and then this word here? It's like you're just gonna have a bunch of questions, and all you gotta do, bro, is just immerse more, okay? And you watch more anime, and the problems will solve itself. It'll solve itself out, guys. So yeah, that's the biggest language. That's the biggest thing about Japanese. Even though it is the hardest language, because you have the content advantage, because you have so much anime, you have so much content that you can watch in language, you can use that to your advantage to immerse yourself and get fluent in language. So yeah, guys, I definitely recommend you guys do it.